Mike Johnson was on my show in July of 2023, shortly before he was named House Speaker unexpectedly. The reason I had him on is because he had become so eloquent, so forceful on the abuses of the U.S. security states, particularly with regard to domestic spying power and the need for there to be reforms. Here's what he told me when he was on my show about FISA 702 and the abuses of the U.S. security state when it comes to domestic surveillance.
I think that's exactly right. And that is what keeps us up at night, Glenn. We're worried about what has become of these agencies that have such broad and expansive powers. The top law enforcement agency in the country that is supposed to be protecting and serving the American people is being used against them. It's violating the privacy of Americans. It is trampling upon their fundamental constitutional rights. And it goes without check because, what so many people are frustrated about is, they asked me today, why can't you guys get accountability? Why can't you bring some order to this? Well, the political reality is here that people sometimes forget is that we only have the majority in one house of Congress right now, and it's a bare majority at that. We don't have in Congress the ability to, indict someone for violating the law or to put them on trial in a court. All we can do is put them on trial in the court of public opinion. That's what the hearings are. And then bring legislative reforms to do our best to ensure that these abuses cannot happen again in the future. Ultimately, too, and this is important, we have the power of the purse. And so the FBI, for example, wants this multi-billion-dollar new headquarters. I don't think they deserve that if they can't even show us that they can respect the constitutional rights of the people they're supposed to be serving. It's gotten out of control, and I think the evidence.
So he wasn't just saying he was concerned about the abuses under 702. He was saying he was so concerned about it that it keeps him up at night. That's how much reform was needed, he said. And it was the same argument as Tulsi Gabbard. In fact, despite CNN's attempt and The Economist's attempt to depict Tulsi Gabbard's opposition to 702 spying as radical and extremist, the reality is there was bipartisan support for reforming that law. And the reason it ended up not being reformed, first under Donald Trump and then under Joe Biden, was because in both administrations, the White House demanded renewal of those laws, those spying powers, with no reforms. And the party loyal to the White House ended up putting up most of their votes against reforms, and FISA renewal ended up passing. In the case of Mike Johnson, though, he was Speaker under the Biden administration, not the Trump administration. So he doesn't have that excuse. Well, the White House of my party told me that they wanted it. Mike Johnson told me that this was an issue of such grave importance to him that it was keeping him up at night. He gets elected Speaker. The bill to renew FISA is on the floor. Not only does he bring that bill to the floor to just renew this law, he blocks any attempts to reform it. He did a complete 180. The minute he's third in line to the presidency, becomes House Speaker, he told me this law was keeping him up at night, and then he did everything in his power to make sure it continued and got extended. Finally, somebody asked him about that in April of 2024. What happened? You were one of the leading, most vocal opponents of domestic spying power, and then you became its most important supporter after you got elected to House Speaker. Why would you change your mind so radically in such a short time? And here's what he said.
When I was a member of the judiciary, I saw all the abuses of the FBI, the terrible abuses over and over and over, the hundreds of thousands of abuses. And then when I became Speaker, I went to the skiff and got the confidential briefing from sort of the other perspective on that to understand the necessity of the Section 702 of FISA and how important it is for national security. And it gave me a different perspective. So I encourage all the members to go to the classified briefing and hear all that and see it so they can evaluate the situation for themselves. And I think some opinions have changed both ways, but that's part of the process. You got to be fully informed.
Have you been?
Okay, I just want you to listen to how deceitful that answer was. He said the reason he changed his mind is because they took him to this super secretive room, the skiff, and they showed him things in that room that made him understand that those powers that he was so worried about are in fact incredibly important. You cannot do without them. He was in Congress before he was Speaker. As he just said, House members have access to those same briefings. He was out there speaking about the evils of FISA and the need to reform it. Had he not been informed, had he not gotten any briefings on this law that he was trying to radically overhaul? It makes no sense, that excuse. Of course he was in briefings previously to becoming Speaker. when he was radically opposed, vocally opposed to this law and its renewal with no reforms. I don't know what they did to him in that super secret room they took him in the NSA or the FBI or the CIA, but it's not what he said. But whatever they did to him there, it absolutely worked to force him to do a complete 180, much like they just did with Tulsi Gabbard, by basically telling her, either you renounce your longtime views and your opposition to unlimited domestic warrantless spying, or you have no chance to get nominated and you'll be completely out of the government and out of power. Pick one or the other. This has been going all the way back to the Obama administration. Here was the Atlantic in August of 2013, just a couple months after we started the Snowden reporting. All the ways Obama wanted to reform the NSA before he was president. So when he was running, he was like, I want to do this to the NSA. I want to curb spying here. Then he gets to be president, and he oversees the largest expansion of warrantless spying ever seen in human history. Quote, when the House of Representatives recently considered an amendment that would have dismantled the NSA's bulk phone record collection program, that's the program we were able to reveal through Edward Snowden, the White House swiftly condemned the measure, condemned the effort to reform that program. But only 5 years previously, Senator Barack Obama, then a Democrat of Illinois, was part of a group of legislators that supported substantial changes to NSA surveillance programs. People voted for him on that basis. And then he gets into be president, and suddenly he becomes the leading advocate of the... Do you see this extremely obvious trend here? It makes undeniably clear who runs Washington. It has nothing to do with the people who win elections. It's a permanent power faction in Washington that always gets its way. They wield far more power than elected officials. And despite the attempt by The Economist and CNN enlisting Tulsi's agencies that she blames to suggest it's some like dark, deranged conspiracy, it was Dwight Eisenhower who warned of that back in 1961. Of the military-industrial complex, he saw the permanent power state, the national security state, the unaccountable, undemocratic national security state growing in the 1950s during the Cold War right under his nose when he was the president, and yet they were doing things under Alan Dulles, the CIA director, that he was never aware of and never told about. He had no control over that agency. And that was 60 years ago. That was before the expansion of Vietnam. That was before the expansion in the 80s under Ronald Reagan and the dirty wars he fought in Central America and the height of the Cold War. It was before 9/11 and the war on terror that exploded these powers even more. And what you see over and over are people who obviously have a sincere and passionate, thoughtful opposition to these powers, and then they immediately reverse it the minute that they themselves might get into power, because it's made very clear to them that it doesn't matter what the elections say, it doesn't matter what people want. We are the ones who control Washington, and if you don't embrace us and cheer us and promise to support everything we want, you're going to be destroyed. You're not going to get anywhere. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.